So, welcome, Rajat. Really appreciate you giving us your time. Um, First of all, let me get started by can you introduce yourself of who are you, what do you do? Because many people in our audience might not still know you.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Rajat. I have a CFA charter. I'm a CFA charter holder. I've been in the finance industry for almost 10 years. I left the finance industry. Now I full time just create content for Bitcoin.
Great. And what got you into Bitcoin? What's a Bitcoin story?
So I there was when I was at work when I was working at one of the companies that I worked at before. One of my coworkers told me to. I think it was in 2020 or maybe it was 2021. I don't remember when Michael Saylor came on the scene, but he basically told me to watch one of Michael Saylor's videos. I went home and I watched the video. I didn't get it. I just ignored it. I was thinking, oh, I don't know what he's talking about. And then somebody else told me to read the Bitcoin Standard. Once I read the Bitcoin Standard, I got into it. I started asking more and more questions. Um, I learned about what it is, how it works. I think one of the good things about the Bitcoin Standard is it gets you to ask more questions than you started with because it gives you so many different concepts that maybe you haven't thought of before, maybe you haven't even imagined to be a possibility. But that's basically it. I read the Bitcoin Standard. I started learning more. I started asking more questions. Um, I started exploring. Started listening to more podcasts. I think that's one of the great things about YouTube. With YouTube, with podcasts like this, um, you can get so many of your questions answered that you may not even have thought of before. Maybe other people, like let's say, for example, if you ask me a question, maybe somebody in your audience wouldn't even have thought of it. That was exactly the way that I was before, right? When you're new, you don't really know, you don't know what you don't know, right? So if somebody asks you a question, if you hear somebody asking a question that maybe you haven't even thought of, it just fills in a little gap in your mind that maybe you didn't even think of before. Maybe you didn't even realize was there. So my journey was basically ignored Michael Saylor at first. Then I listened to Bitcoin Standard. Then I started listening to more and more Michael Saylor content, more and more content from different content creators, just podcast conversations between me, like people like me and you, conversations between people who are learning, people who have spent the time learning, and now I'm here.
Excellent. And then, did I hear that correct? That you've left your like the 10-year finance job and you're doing this full time? Is that what you did?
Yeah, yeah. So I was working in finance. I was working as a fixed income analyst at one of Canada's bigger banks. So I was working that job for about 2 years. Worked before that in finance. I did financial services. So different roles in financial services. Um, I moved between banks. I've been moved between brokerages. Um, yeah, and eventually I left because I was thinking there's such a huge gap of knowledge with finance in general between what people know and what people should know. But all these jobs that I was doing, I was basically just helping millionaires and billionaires just get richer, right? There's no point of that. There was no fulfillment. There was no, it didn't make me happier. If anything, it made me feel more depressed. But now, I mean, I'm helping a lot of people who have no idea about whether or not Bitcoin exists. I get regular messages from people saying, if you hadn't posted about this, I wouldn't have known about it. I would not have bought it. Um, your content helped me, and that really helps me, right? With the job that I left, I mean, there was no fulfillment, there was no happiness involved because all I was doing was I was making trades. I was basically just a number in the background, right? When I started posting on social media, I started posting about personal finance content. I eventually pivoted into Bitcoin. I think that was in um, August of 2023 when I started posting full time about Bitcoin. Before that, I was posting about stocks, real estate, bonds, whatever I could post about. But now, I mean, my opinion has changed.
That's so amazing. That's such an interesting story. So, someone who's highly successful, doing a very very well paid finance job, decides to shift over to finance content and then converts completely to Bitcoin. So, what does Bitcoin? So, definitely Bitcoin must be something special to you. So, what does Bitcoin mean to you, and what is Bitcoin according to you, which prompted you to move fully to Bitcoin?
I think the main thing about Bitcoin that really got me was, well, I mean, it started off with the number goes up, obviously. When the number goes up, it catches your attention. Then when you start digging into it, you start realizing that this is more than just profits. This is a revolution. This is a change in everybody's life. This is a change in how people are going to live. This is a change in um, how people are going to see the world. And one of the things that really stands out to me is the fact that with Bitcoin, governments can't take it from you. Nobody can stop you from using it. Um, nobody can censor your transactions. Nobody can get you to not spend it on what they don't want you to spend it on and then that really stood out to me because it shows me that in the old system we're pretty much tied to a certain set of principles that governments want us to follow. And when I was working in the brokerage, I noticed a lot of people's accounts they were locked, right? So let's say, for example, I'm in Canada. If we owe the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, taxes, or if there was some kind of issue where, let's say, somebody had a divorce and they needed to pay alimony and they hadn't paid for a while, the government would come in and, well, not the government, the CRA would come in. They would call the brokerage account and they would just block their account. They would just stop them from using it. There was no need, there was no ability for them to even touch their money, even though they've spent their entire life collecting this money, putting it together, spending the time and energy to actually earn it. They have no power over it, right? And that's what really changed. Just connect. I guess the experience with the brokerage accounts, the experience with the finance industry, really showed me how Bitcoin sets itself apart from every other form of money. I think before Bitcoin, I didn't understand how money worked. I didn't understand really anything about money from first principles, right? I didn't understand that money is supposed to be a store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. All I thought of was money is something that you use to get what you want. That's it. And that's I think that's what the majority of people think. The majority of people think that money is just something that you exchange, you give it away, and you get back something of value that you want. But to me, again, we'll go back to the question here: why is Bitcoin so significant? It's because Bitcoin fulfills all of those properties that money is supposed to have. Nothing else has ever done that. Nothing else will do that. No other cryptocurrency can do that. No other um, commodity can do that because Bitcoin is specifically designed to be the monetary good, the monetary medium that everybody is supposed to use.
So break that, Rajat, for me. I'm a normie. I just do my normal job. I go to work. I'm very well paid. Let's say in India, I'm a tech worker or I'm a financial services industry worker. I'm a banker. I'm a brokerage house. I'm a coder. I work for I live in one of the metros or upcoming metros, and I do my hard work and I earn good money, and then I save it in various instruments. What's wrong with that? Why are you telling me to think about this when I'm very happy in this ecosystem where I get paid salary, bonus, I save it, and then I save in the normal methods, which might be like a fixed deposit with a bank or a mutual fund. I might also have some stocks, and I'm imagining that I will buy a house at someday, and hopefully, when I have enough capital, buy another house someday. So that's what I'm thinking. And then you are telling me, no, I should think differently. Why should I think differently?
I think the main problem with how people think, the main problem with the scenario that you're getting paid really well, you're getting
Yeah,
paid, you're doing a very difficult job, you're creating so much value, but the thing is that you're saving in something that can be created out of thin air. Can I share my screen quickly? I just want
yeah,
to
yeah,
show
sure.
something. I have a graphic that I like to refer to if people want to learn a little bit more. So in the current system, let's say, for example, this is the total amount of money, the green, the green part of the screen.
Uh-huh.
Green is the total amount of money that ever exists. So we have $100. Of course, the reality is there's billions,
Yeah,
trillions of dollars floating around. But let's say in this hypothetical scenario, there's $100, and let's say you get paid $5 every single year. You get 5% of the total money supply every single year, right? So you're getting that amount of money. You put in the effort, you put in the time, and you're saving it. You're putting it in your bank account. You're expecting that you'll be able to buy whatever amount of goods and services is that should represent that $5, right?
yeah,
But let's say overnight, your government comes and doubles the money supply. They increased the money supply by 100%. Now you went from having, so you still have $5, but your government now created another $100 and they dumped it on the market. So instead of having 5% of the total money supply, so you went from having 5% of the total money supply to having 2.5%. So what exactly does this mean? People think, oh, who cares if governments can print money? Doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. It doesn't make a difference to me. All I want is to be able to buy whatever I want to buy. So let's go into a little bit more of a detailed scenario here. So you can exchange your $5. Let's say in this hypothetical scenario, you can exchange your $5 for a basket of groceries. You can exchange your money, the savings that you have, for food. You can exchange it for utility. Essentially, money is supposed to buy utility. So you can exchange your $5 for a basket of grocery. But when your government doubles the money supply, and this is happening everywhere, the amount of money in the system is increasing everywhere. No matter what currency you save in dollars, you save in rupees, you save in Canadian dollars, euros, pounds, whatever you do, the amount of money is increasing. So what happens when the money supply doubles? You can now only buy half the groceries that you were able to before, because your $5 only represents half of the total amount of money that existed before. Your government can create more money, but they can't print goods and services. They can't print, we'll go to another scenario, they can't print cars. For example, maybe you were able to afford a Lamborghini with your $5 before. Now you can only afford half a Lamborghini, right? Maybe before you're able to buy a house with your $5 out of the current money supply, you're able to buy a house. Now you can only buy half a house. So that's the problem. I think that's the main problem here. My wife is a nurse. She works with a lot of doctors. They work all the time. They're working crazy hours. They're working uh, 12, 16 hours. Sometimes they're on call for 48 hours. Sometimes they're on call for a whole week. This is how it was before. I think they changed it. But before, they used to be on call for a whole week. Sometimes the doctors would actually sleep at the hospital. But they work so hard. The thing is that they're saving in pieces of paper that can be printed out of thin air. And I think that's the problem. The people who are working the hardest, they're forced to do a second job. I don't know if you've read the book. I don't know if your audience has read the book Safe by Saifuddin Ammous, the Bitcoin Standard. Basically, he says where he says that the people who exist in today's current financial system, the legacy financial system,
They have
they
to
have to
earn
have
it
two jobs.
twice.
Right, they have to earn it twice. That's exactly what it is. Very well said. They have to earn it twice. So basically, they have to first earn it at their job,
Yeah.
then they have to earn it by investing it. Then they have to make the returns from investing their money. And
Yeah.
that's what Bitcoin fixes.
Yeah.
Instead of instead of you having to deal with your government doubling the money supply, instead of you having to deal with this, we'll go back. Instead of you having to deal with this, the system stays at this. So nobody can increase the money supply. The only way to get more money is to create more value. So the only way that your government can get more money is through taxes. The only way that people will pay taxes is if they're creating enough value for them to stay in that country. If, let's say, your government starts stealing from you, if if they start trying to take your properties, if they start being more tyrannical, people can move their Bitcoin wherever they want to. They can leave the country. So there's nothing the government can do to force you to pay for whatever they're doing to pay for their operations. And that's the thing that Bitcoin that separates Bitcoin from really everything else, right? You can't increase the money supply. Nobody can take advantage of you. Nobody can stop you from spending your money. Nobody can take your money away from you. And that to me, that's what Bitcoin is. That's what separates Bitcoin from everything else. That's what makes Bitcoin such a powerful tool. The fact that nobody can increase the green, nobody can increase the green circle, and nobody can take away your blue circle. In the old
Yeah.
system, that wasn't possible.
Yeah, yeah. Very well said, Rajat. But let me push you back a little bit from using a normie piece and saying, I live in a good country. I don't live in a country which has hyperinflation, fortunately, and it's not. These are problems which happen in Nigeria or Argentina or some of the other countries. Fortunately, my government is good. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I want to do everything good. I have seen all my peers being well, and fortunately, till now, I've been working really hard. And after passing out from college, in the last 5, 10 years that I've been working, now I can afford a car. I have a good family. My children go to good school. Once in a while, I can do a foreign holiday. So life is very good for me. And maybe this is not applicable. What you're telling me is for someone maybe who lives in a country where the government is tyrannical or bad. But in India, everything is okay and there's no problem. And why should I be worried? I should be normally. For decades and for ages, people have been saving their money in fixed deposits and mutual funds and stocks, and I'm very happy with it. And I'm looking forward to buying the next house. And why should I spend the time thinking about this? This is not
Well,
applicable for me.
well, of course. Well, over time, uh, it is applicable to you because your cost of living is going up. What that means is that it's not that I mean, you may not care if you don't have savings. Maybe you don't care if you don't have your cost of living goes up if you don't have savings. But if you have savings, let's say you have a million rupees saved up. I don't even know how much a million rupees would buy. I think a million rupees is what, 60 Canadian dollars or so, or sorry, a
No,
Canadian 1 Canadian dollar is 60 rupees or so. Is that what it is?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
approximately right. Yeah, so you
So
can do
so
a
whatever.
rough math on $1 is about 100. It's about 80, 85, but you can do
Okay.
a rough math on 100
There
just
you go.
for
Okay, okay. So let's go
argument.
with
Yeah.
100. So let's say, for example, if you could buy a banana for 100 rupees today,
Yes.
I don't know what the price. Maybe it's lower than that. But let's say you could buy a banana for 100 rupees today.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, the price of that banana is going to increase. Why is that? It's because the value of your money has decreased. The price of the banana should decrease because this is a great concept from this guy Jeff Booth. Not sure if your audience knows him, but
Yeah.
basically the world is supposed to be deflationary. The cost of everything should be decreasing because we get better at producing things. We get better at producing them because they take less time, they take less effort, they take less labor, they take less raw materials. Well, actually, not raw materials, but everything else they should take less. They should take less time, effort, labor because technology has been improving. Over time, we get better at making things. So let's say, for example, making those bananas. We've started using pesticides. We've started using um, GMO, genetically modified organisms, all that stuff. And over time, we've gotten better at making bananas. Bananas have become more consistent. We can make a lot more bananas in the same time than, let's say, for example, before all this technology
Yeah.
existed. It
Yeah.
would have taken a lot more time to make bananas. But why are bananas getting more expensive? The supply of bananas is increasing, or it should technically be increasing because we're getting better at making bananas and growing bananas. At the same time, though, the price of the banana is increasing. And why is that? It's because the base layer, the monetary standard of whatever money you're using, the supply of it is increasing. So over time, for example, we're getting more and more dollars added to the system in the US. We're getting more and more dollars added to the system, meaning that more dollars are chasing the same number of goods. So if we go back to the example that I was talking about, you can print more dollars. Your government can print more rupees. My government can print more Canadian dollars. But the thing is that they can't print goods and services. They can keep printing more and more dollars. They can keep throwing them at problems. For example, there was a proposal from not proposal. I think she had an economic plan. Kamala Harris. She was saying how she's going to give $25,000 to people to buy new homes.
Yeah.
And if you really think of it from first principles, that doesn't make any sense, right? It's all that's going to do is increase the price of homes because more people are chasing houses, more money is chasing the same number of houses. She hasn't increased the number of houses that are built. All she's done, if that plan, let's say, went ahead, all she's done is taken the country into further debt, and now the country is having to pay that money in the future. But all this does is it enriches the people who already own houses. It enriches the people who own tens, hundreds, thousands of houses, right? Because the value of their houses is going to increase. More and more people are able to chase the same houses with more dollars.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
dollar, the number of houses hasn't increased. You can press a button to increase the number of dollars, but you can't press a button to increase the number of houses. So let's go back to what you were saying. We don't live in a tyrannical regime. It doesn't matter. You don't know when your money will suddenly be useless. I think in India they what did they do? They basically made it so that people can't use the 1,000 rupee note,
Yeah, yeah. So there was a
right?
demonetization which was done. Yeah. So they
So let's say,
changed
for
a
example,
rupee note which was not no more legal tender.
so what was the process? Was that with that? Is it just
So
not
it was
usable? Did you have to go to a
overnight
bank?
decided that hey, this is no more legal tender. So if you have that, you have to go to your bank and exchange it for the new legal tender, which was available, and you have to kind of deposit if you have old currency. It was still like you could go to the bank and exchange it for the new legal tender, but a particular denomination was no more legal tender.
I think it was the 500 and 1,000
Yes,
rupee notes, right?
yes, yes,
So what that means is, let's say, for example, if you saved all of this money and you had it in your in your attic and it's just sitting there or wherever you have it set saved.
yeah,
I think part of the reason was that they wanted people to stop evading taxes.
yeah, yeah.
Was that part of it? So now let's
Yes.
say you have all these savings and your government doesn't know that you own this savings. You can't do anything with it. There's literally nothing you can do because your government just changed the rules.
Yeah.
Money is basically a game, right? Money is a game. You have a set of rules that you have to follow to play the game of money. If the set of rules changes, then how are you going to keep competing? How are you going to remain competitive? You can't. It's impossible,
Got it.
right?
Got it.
If the rules change, if the government can print more money, if the government can destroy the value of money, then the rules have changed. You've kind of lost. You can't
Yeah.
do anything about it, right? And it doesn't matter how tyrannical your government is. You don't know what they'll do in the future.
Yeah.
That's the thing. This is all based on human emotions. If the system is about to collapse, your government can do whatever it wants to
Yeah.
change the rules, to make it an advantage in fairness to them.
Yeah, and it's an interesting piece that in the experiment of fiat currencies, all have gone to zero, and it
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether your country is at this point of time printing at X percentage versus Y. Yeah, it's just a spectrum. At some stage, there will be incentives which will force the whoever is the set of people who are in the money creation process to create more of it, because it just doesn't take any more effort, as
Yeah.
you said, to create more money, but it takes a lot more effort to create houses or create bananas or create any of thing of value. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point. So Rajat, let's say that I still don't understand all of these technicalities, because life was still great before I got into and heard this. What's your advice to me as a newbie, saying I still don't understand it? I don't have the time, effort, or energy to read this book that you are recommending that I read, the Bitcoin Standard from Saifuddin, and but I am still listening. This number is keep going up. So, what's your advice to this person? What should that person do? He or she does not want to spend the time, but he has zero allocation to Bitcoin. So, what do you think is your advice to that person?
Well, I would suggest personally that they should buy at least a little bit, right? They should just buy a little bit because getting off zero is the key. Even if you have, let's say, 1% of a Bitcoin, you're better off than someone who has 0%. Okay, so let's say, for example, your 0.01 Bitcoin is worth 70,000 rupees, and that's what you can afford today. Let's say, for example, you can go out and you can just
Yeah,
buy it. Is
yeah.
that is that a hard purchase for people to make in India?
Yeah, so there will
0.01
be people in a spectrum, but there will be a lot of people who can do
who can't
a
afford it.
0.01 Bitcoin. They can afford it. So
Yeah,
those
okay,
who are
okay.
investing in stock, or those who are investing in real estate, it'll not be like, hey, it is of no value, but they can easily do it.
Yeah. So the way that I see it, you may think, okay, 0.01 Bitcoin is nothing. A lot of people will tell you, oh, 0.01 Bitcoin isn't going to do anything. It's not going to grow enough for you to make some kind of profit. But the way that I see it, let's say you have 0.01 Bitcoin, that's all you can afford. You buy it and you just leave it. Let's say 10 years from now, that 0.01 Bitcoin has increased in value by 10x. So instead of having 70,000 rupees, you now have 700,000 rupees. Of course, the value of the rupee is going to decrease, but the point here is that you can use that 700,000 rupees to now do something. Let's say, for example, you're in a ton of debt,
Yeah,
or you have a job that you hate. Now you can use that 700,000 rupees to maybe start some kind of business. Maybe you can have some runway for yourself where you can now use that money to build something for the future that will generate revenue forever. Um, maybe you can just hold on to the Bitcoin. Maybe you can borrow against it. I don't know what you would do with it, but the point here is that savings is savings. The amount of savings that you have isn't, I mean, it's relevant, but if you have no savings, then having even some savings is better than nothing. But I would say for your audience, go ahead and spend that 70,000 rupees on something, because you're probably going to spend it on something stupid anyways, right? That's how I
Yeah.
think of it. I
Yeah.
would spend that money on something dumb anyways. So why not just spend it on a little bit of Bitcoin, right? Because the thing is that with Bitcoin, you could be securing your future even with a little tiny amount. If we split it between everybody in the world, not everybody can afford 0.01 Bitcoin. Only what is it? 210 million people can afford 0.01 Bitcoin in the
Yeah.
entire world. No, sorry, not 200. 2.1 billion. 2.1 billion people in the world can afford a 0.01 Bitcoin. But that's not going to be the number, right? 2.1 billion people aren't going to be able to buy it because some people have tens, hundreds, thousands of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So affording even a small amount. Today you can buy that 0.01 Bitcoin for 70,000 rupees. In the future, it'll cost you 700,000 rupees. Then it'll cost you
Yeah.
7 million rupees. Then it'll cost you 70 million rupees. It'll keep going up. It sounds ridiculous to people. It just sounds stupid. They think, "Oh, this is crazy. This guy doesn't even know what he's talking about." But I've gone through it. I've seen Bitcoin at 3,000 US dollars.
Yeah. And
Then I've
let's
seen
use
it go
US
up to
dollars. Most people understand US dollars. So, yeah.
right. So I've seen it go from 3,000 US dollars to 90,000 US dollars, right? And to me, I mean, I thought at 3,000, oh, it's not going to go higher. I ignored it. I thought it's going to go a little bit lower. Let me buy it at 2,500. Let me buy it at 2,000. Then I realized, no, don't do this. Just buy it and hold it. That's all you can do. You can't try to time the market. You can't try to get the perfect buy. Studying Bitcoin is, of course, the key. When you study Bitcoin, you kind of understand that you shouldn't sell when there's a dip. I think that's one of the problems. If people don't study Bitcoin, they're going to sell early.
Yeah.
That's one of the main issues. But buy a little bit, then start studying. You have the time. I'm telling you, you have the time. Whoever's listening to this, you have the time. Don't say that you don't have the time. You do have the time. This is your future. If you can spend 10 hours studying Bitcoin, maybe you can take 10 years off of your job. Maybe you can
Mm.
retire 10 years earlier, right?
Mm.
Just put in the time. 10 hours. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it while you're walking. You can do it whenever, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing. You can listen to a podcast. You have headphones. You can listen to it on headphones. You can walk around and listen to it. Just study Bitcoin. Buy a little bit and start studying afterwards.
Yeah. Great. So, Rajat, paint a picture for me that there are person A and person B. Person A didn't take your advice, continues to do his or her job, and is continues to earn the right money and invest in his current existing distribution of fixed deposits and stocks and real estate. And person B, who picked up your advice and bought, let's say, point 0.1 Bitcoin, and paint this different picture for the next 10 years. So 2024 or 2025, we are almost like the new year is here. 2035, what do you expect these two individuals to be? And let's talk, and we can use US dollars as a benchmark. And let's say person A did not and person B did. What do you think would be the difference 10 years out for these two people in their economic status or economic well-being?
So I wouldn't be able to predict where it's going, but I can show you some trends for where it's gone in the past, right? There's a great website called Priced in Bitcoin 21. On this website, you can see different metrics for what the prices of things have been, what they've gone up to, what they've gone down to. So, for example, in 2011, the price of a house in the US, the United States median new house, today it costs 4.91 Bitcoin. But in 2011, it cost 64,000 Bitcoin because the price of Bitcoin was so much lower. But at the same time, if we look at the price of a house in terms of US dollars, in terms of US dollars, it's always gone up. It's
Mm.
doubled in that time. It's gone from 217,000 in 2011 all the way to 434,000 in 2024. The price of the house has doubled in terms of US dollars, but in terms of Bitcoin, it's dropped by
Mm.
99.9%. So let's say, for example, if you were to buy zero point 0.1 Bitcoin today
Yeah.
zero point 0.1 Bitcoin is
$9,000? Yeah.
9,000 US dollars. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, if you were to buy that $9,000 worth of Bitcoin instead of putting a down payment on a house, I think at some point, instead of just being able to put a down payment on a house, let's say you were to buy $100,000 house and you could put $9,000 down payment. Instead of being able to buy the instead of being able to pay for the down payment in 10 years, you'll be able to buy the entire house.
Mm.
Right? I think
Amazing.
that alone that just paints the picture of where this is going, right? This It's going to outpace housing significantly. It's already doing that. We can see that from the price of houses from this chart. We can see the prices just decreasing. Even a year ago, November 1st, 2023, the price of a house was 12.54 Bitcoin. Today it's 4.9 Bitcoin.
Yeah. In just a year, priced in Bitcoin's half versus priced in fiat, it's maybe 20% up or
Yeah,
15% up.
exactly.
That's great. That's great. This is so amazing. So I fully plus one to what you said. Get off zero. Spend the time to study Bitcoin. If you do 80 hours in a week, or at least 40 hours in a week to earn the money, spend maybe 1/10 or 140 minutes in a week
Yeah,
to get started on Bitcoin, and take your time. But I think the next 10 years will be, as Michael says, the gold rush. And the opportunity for anyone who gets off zero now versus gets off zero 5 years out would be completely different
yeah,
from the stack that they might end up with for the same amount of allocation. And we've seen this happening every 4 years, as you were rightly mentioning. Like if in 2020, approximately, you wanted to buy a Bitcoin, you could buy it in 3,000 US dollars. But in 2024, today, you will have to spend $90,000. So if
yeah,
someone spent whatever, allocated $3,000 and they got one Bitcoin, today that same person has to put $90,000. And I think you might be doing amazing job and creating a lot of value for the society, but still the 3,000 to become 90,000 to get that one Bitcoin, and that number will keep going up as the price as time goes by, because as you rightly mentioned, more and more people will understand about Bitcoin, and this is a fixed supply asset. And historically, there's, at least I'm not aware of any other fixed supply asset. So it becomes a little hard to wrap your head around it of why this will go up. But number will keep going up, and getting off zero is very, very important.
yeah. And if we think about it, the amount of Bitcoin that you could get back then, you could buy one Bitcoin for $3,000. Today, you can buy 0.03 Bitcoin for $3,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very, very, yeah. So if you just wait for 5 years, whatever allocation you are comfortable with, get off zero, make that allocation, and versus waiting 5 years, because the same thing might be true. Let's say you wanted to allocate $3,000 in 2020, you would have got one Bitcoin.
Yeah,
And the same allocation of $3,000, as you rightly mentioned, would get you 0.03 Bitcoin. So that's the opportunity cost of waiting and not getting off zero. So you can choose to wait. It's of course ultimately ultimate each person's choice, but it most likely will be a very, very economically costly choice to wait.
yeah, very costly. I think that's probably going to be one of the most expensive decisions that people make. Because if you really think about it, it's your retirement that's at risk here. You're paying for your retirement. You're paying for your savings, your future savings. Over time, your retirement is getting more and more expensive. Of course, you can probably in 50 years you may still be able to retire with 0.03 Bitcoin. I think that's highly likely, but how much sooner would you have been able to retire with one Bitcoin?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, great. Rajat, what's the CFA story? I've heard that there was something which happened in your CFA story. Why don't you share that with our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So somebody reported me to the CFA Institute for being, I guess, too bullish on Bitcoin. They they said that I was making claims that are unsubstantiated, that I haven't done the research. They claimed that I think that this thing is going to go up a lot faster, a lot more than it actually will, and the things that I'm saying don't really make any sense. So they reported me, and the CFA Institute did an investigation. They looked into my conduct, as if you want to say it like that. It actually went all the way to the head of investigations. So eventually, I told them, "Hey, if you haven't studied this thing, then of course there's nothing I can do to help you. I sent them my own content. I sent them my videos, and at one point I mean, they backed down, right? Because it didn't really make any sense for them to go after me because the stuff that I've been saying has been right over the last year and a half. I've been 100% right about everything that I posted. I mean, I've been making some pretty crazy claims. I said Bitcoin might hit $100,000 by the end of this year. It's almost there, right? And I don't think you can really argue with the truth. So they gave up. I mean, to me, it's just crazy that people would actually report you. They would have your livelihood risked because you made a claim that they don't like, and that's exactly what happened in this case. So they reported me to the CFA Institute, and the CFA Institute could have taken away my CFA charter, but I mean that didn't happen. So
Yeah, it's yeah. I think that's such an interesting story that you passionately believe in it, and you were doing it, and you were doing the right thing to the best of what we've seen the truth, and how your prediction of it'll hit 100,000 is almost coming true.
yeah.
And someone didn't like it because and they would be so negative about it and want to take away your livelihood. But yeah, that's really nice to hear. So where can people find you, Rajat, if they want to keep learning from you? What's the best place to find you? And yeah, what are some of the places to find you?
So I post a lot on YouTube. I post a lot on Twitter. I post a lot on Instagram. I have a newsletter. I have a community private group that I run. All those things. I think the best place to find me would probably be YouTube because YouTube I post the most valuable content. I think on Twitter I just have fun at this point. I just post whatever I want to, whatever comes to my mind. With YouTube, I actually think out my videos. I think about them before I post them. Um, on Twitter, it's just all short form content. Just this this and this. But on YouTube, I try to go in depth. I try to explain, oh, Bitcoin is going to $1 million. Why is Bitcoin go to $1 million? You should have 0.01 Bitcoin. Why should you have 0.01 Bitcoin? So I would say go to my YouTube. It's Rajat Soni Finance. Maybe you can link it in the description or something.
Yeah.
Um, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram.
Excellent. Super. So before we let you go, we can't let you go without giving some predictions. So what do you think would be 2030? So if
2030. Well,
2030, what do you think by the end of this decade, where do you think Bitcoin is going in US dollar terms?
I have a feeling that I'm going to either look like I'm a fool because I'm way too bullish, or I'm going to look like a pessimist because I'm way too bearish. So I personally think, I mean, the reality of this fixed supply asset is that there's so much demand, and I don't think the demand can be fulfilled because the supply of the asset is finite. So if you think about it, how many people in the world want one whole Bitcoin? Probably a lot, probably more
Yeah.
than 21 million,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what that means is that the people who are willing to buy one Bitcoin, the people who can afford it, they will buy it. But eventually, everybody's going to be priced out of buying one Bitcoin. I actually think that people like Warren Buffett, for example, eventually he'll be outpriced from buying one Bitcoin because there just won't be a Bitcoin available for him. Who knows how long that'll take? I mean, who knows if he'll probably pass away by then? Maybe somebody with the same level of wealth as him will eventually be outpriced from buying one Bitcoin. At least they won't be able to buy it all at once. I think the price of Bitcoin is going to go up significantly. For example, Fidelity was saying by 2040, one Bitcoin could go to $1 billion. And I mean, it makes sense, right? With the US coming out and saying they're going to possibly start a strategic Bitcoin reserve with all these companies, all these countries, Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy saying that they're going to buy $42 billion worth of Bitcoin. All of that stuff, I think, is just coming together, right? It's all happening at the same time. Microsoft is voting on whether or not they should buy Bitcoin. Who knows what's going to happen with that? I personally think 2030, a minimum of 1 million US dollars.
Great, great. So you're saying if someone parked some percentage of their wealth today, let's say they put 1% of their portfolio into Bitcoin, by 2030 they should expect that to be on a same value basis 10% of their portfolio. So a 10x increase from where it is as of now.
I mean, it depends on what else they have. If they
Yeah,
have like certain assets will outperform other assets, of course. If they
yeah,
have, I actually I did a calculation just showing you where I think the prices are where, I mean, your allocation would go. So if you
Mm-hmm.
take a look at this spreadsheet, what you're seeing is your initial allocation to Bitcoin, your
Mm-hmm.
initial allocation to stocks,
Uh-huh.
the final value of your Bitcoin, and the final value of your stock. So let's say, for example, if you start with $1 of Bitcoin, or 1%, I guess you can
Mm-hmm.
say, and
Mm-hmm.
99% in stocks. These are the
Mm-hmm.
assumptions that I made. So I'll zoom in a
Mm-hmm.
little bit just to show you. The
Yeah.
assumptions that I made are that you have a 20-year time horizon,
Yeah.
35% returns on Bitcoin for 10 years. This is extremely conservative, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
30% for the following 10 years. And then we have 7% returns for stocks. By the time that I guess by the time that this is over,
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin should be over $40 million. When I did this calculation, Bitcoin was at around 55 or 60K,
Mm-hmm.
something
Mm-hmm.
like that. But at some point, let's say you go with a 1% allocation to Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
and my assumptions are correct: 35% for 10 years and 30% for the following 10. You're going to have a 60% allocation to Bitcoin in 20 years. You're going to have
Wow.
uh, only 40% to stocks, even though you started with 99% in stocks and 1% in Bitcoin. You're going to go to 60 and 30 and 60 and 40. Basically, you're going to be in the 60-40 portfolio, but the opposite way, right? You're not going to have bonds, you're going to have stocks and Bitcoin, but you're going to have 40% in stock. So if we go a little further, let's say you go with, instead of 1%, you go with 5% allocation. You'll have almost 90% allocation to Bitcoin and 10%, 11% allocation to stocks, right?
Yeah.
If you go with 10%, let's say you go with a 10% allocation to Bitcoin, you'll end off with 94% in Bitcoin in 20 years versus 5.6% in stocks. So the power of this, that's the power. This is just showing you the power
Wow.
of
Yeah.
putting even a little bit of money towards Bitcoin. Even if you start with 1%, let's
Yeah.
say you have $1 million and you put $10,000 into Bitcoin,
Yeah.
you'll end up with 60% of your portfolio in Bitcoin in the next 20 years. You'll end up
Yeah.
with, um, so if you have, let's say, $1 million, you'll end up with a $10 million portfolio. We'll just go here. You'll end up with a $10 million portfolio. Out of that, $4 million will be stocks, even though you started with
Yeah.
99% in stocks today,
Yeah.
and $66 million will be Bitcoin.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. And
Crazy
assuming
numbers.
a person B who misses and does not do this 1% allocation, then that person will end up with just $4 million of just a stock, right?
Yeah,
Because that 1 million, they didn't put that 1% or $10,000 into Bitcoin. They'll end up with whatever is that $3.9 million worth of stocks only.
exactly.
Yeah.
Slightly more
Yeah.
than this, maybe
Yeah.
like $3-4 more than
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
scenario,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're risking just 1% of your portfolio.
Yeah.
Again, if that 1% goes to zero, it goes to
Yeah.
zero, right? You're not really hurt that badly. But if it doesn't, if that 1% does even remotely close to what I think it'll, if it does even close to the same performance that I think it will, I actually think that Bitcoin's going to outperform these metrics significantly. I don't think it's going to be 35%.
Yeah.
I actually think the returns are going to increase. People think we're going to see diminishing returns. I don't think so, because
Yeah.
over time, fewer and fewer people have to sell their Bitcoin. Let's say, for example, if you have 10 million, let's say you start with $100,000 worth of Bitcoin and you end up with $10 million worth of Bitcoin. Why are you going to sell? What are you going to sell it for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you really think of it from that perspective, it means that less Bitcoin
Less
volume is
Bitcoin
going to
liquidity will be available for new buyers. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
Yeah.
More and
Yeah.
more Bitcoin is locked away. It's stuck.
Yeah.
It's never
Yeah.
going to come back to the market, and that's what makes it even more
Yeah.
valuable. Bitcoin is a Veblen good, right? As the price goes up, more and more people want it.
Yeah. And as I keep sharing with some of my listeners, saying not buying Bitcoin might be a higher risk than buying Bitcoin. So you mathematically just showed that, saying if you did 1% allocation, and let's say Rajat and Abhay and whatever these guys were saying, they smoked out and they were wrong, you still have your 99% and
Yeah.
they'll get whatever you were able to get. But if you did not put that 1%, then if Rajat and this conversation was even remotely true, then that will be a very very bad or costly decision for the economic portfolio of that person. So getting off zero is very very important.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Just get off zero. Get as much as you can, whatever you can afford. Even if you can afford a small amount, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, Rajat, for your time. Really appreciate.